You ever ride a train at night? I mean, really ride it. When the world outside looks like it's been erased? When even your own reflection feels like someone else watching you? Most people don't know this, but there's a set of tracks cutting through the Midwest that's not on any map anymore. Old railway workers call it the Midnight Line. Runs once a year, never late, never early. They say the train that rides it doesn't go anywhere real. And if you ever see its dim yellow headlights drifting toward you, slow, quiet, like it's been expecting you, you don't get on. Because once you do, you don't come back the same, or at all. So let me tell you what happened to a guy named Jason Carter, 22 years old, college kid, just trying to go home, and how one wrong step onto the wrong train at the wrong moment took him somewhere no living person should ever go. Take a breath, get comfortable, and keep the lights dim. This one works better when the world feels a little soft around the edges. Welcome back to the channel. Lean back, close your eyes if you like, and let the story settle around you like a cold fog. Tonight's tale is quiet, slow, a little lonely, the kind of horror that follows you into your dreams and waits on the other side. If you enjoy these deep, cinematic horror journeys, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next descent into the strange and the unseen. All right, let's step onto the platform with Jason. Jason Carter wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to be standing alone at a half-abandoned Midwest station at 12:11 a.m., shivering under a flickering sodium lamp, holding a duffel bag that kept slipping off his shoulder. He was supposed to be on his usual bus home, supposed to be asleep in a cheap seat, listening to some true crime podcast, and ignoring the guy next to him eating chips too loudly. But the universe didn't care about supposed to. The bus broke down halfway across town. His phone was dying. Rain came out of nowhere. And then he saw a long, dark train gliding into the station with almost no noise, like it wasn't moving on tracks at all. The headlights were an old pale yellow, the kind you only see in antique photos. Metal sides scratched, dented, paint peeling. But the strange part wasn't the train. It was the fact that Jason didn't remember hearing it arrive. 1 second the tracks were empty. The next, this thing was already there, waiting. He checked the schedule board. Dead, dusty, blank. Station office, locked. Vending machines, out of order. He looked around. No one, not a single living soul in sight. Jason muttered under his breath, "This has got to be the weirdest Uber ever." But he was cold and late, and he just wanted to get home. So he walked to the only open door, a heavy steel sliding door that hissed softly, as if breathing, and he stepped inside. The faceless passengers. At first he thought everyone was just asleep. Rows of passengers sat perfectly still, heads slightly turned downward, hands in their laps. Men, women, children, all dressed strangely out of time-old coats, outdated dresses, faded flannel shirts that looked like they'd been through a war. But something felt wrong. Off. Unnatural. Jason walked down the aisle, the floor creaking under his shoes. He whispered, "Excuse me, does this train go to..." Then he froze. The nearest passenger, a middle-aged man in a brown coat, lifted his head just a little. There was no face, no mouth, no nose, just smooth skin and two dark, empty holes where eyes should have been. Not eyes, not darkness, voids. Like looking into a hole punched straight through reality. Jason stepped back so hard he almost tripped. "What the? Hey, are you okay? Is this makeup or something?" The faceless man didn't move again. None of them did. And then behind him, a voice murmured with icy calm, "Tickets." Jason whipped around. The conductor didn't look like anyone Jason had ever seen. Tall, thin, almost too thin, with an old-fashioned uniform, straight out of a black and white photograph. Faded navy blue coat, brass buttons, gloves that looked more like dried leather than fabric. His hat cast a dark shadow over his face, but Jason could see the smile underneath. Or maybe it wasn't a smile, just lips, stretched too long. I didn't buy a ticket," Jason said. "I just got on because..." The conductor raised a gloved hand. "No ticket needed, not tonight." His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reading from a script written centuries ago. Jason tried to force a laugh. "So, where does this train go, exactly?" The conductor leaned in slightly, close enough that Jason could hear the breath rattling inside the man's chest. "Everyone here, the conductor whispered, is on their final ride. Jason's skin prickled. Final? Like last stop of the night or? The conductor didn't blink. Everyone aboard is on the way to meet their fate. I think I got on the wrong train, Jason said, his voice cracking. There are no wrong trains, the conductor replied. Only early passengers. Jason backed away and collapsed into the nearest seat. His heart thumped so loud, he was sure the faceless passengers could hear it. The train lurched. Lights flickered. A long, low horn echoed through the dark. Jason turned toward the window. Nothing. Not trees. Not towns. Not fields. Just blackness. A thick, moving darkness, as if the world outside had been swallowed whole. Shapes drifted in it, long shadows, slow and weightless, like figures floating beneath deep water. Jason whispered, "Oh, hell no. Nope, nope. I'm dreaming. This is a sleep paralysis dream. This is..." The conductor's voice echoed from somewhere behind him, low and cold. "Do not look outside too long." They looked back. Jason's breath caught. He jerked away from the window and shut his eyes tight. The train settled into a steady hum, too steady, too smooth, like it wasn't rolling on tracks, just gliding in a straight line through the void. Jason forced himself to breathe. He pulled out his phone. 3% battery. No service. Of course. Then he noticed something strange, a newspaper lying on the empty seat beside him. Old, yellowed, like it had been printed decades ago. But the date, tomorrow. And their front page headline, local student dies in Highway 46 collision, 22-year-old killed instantly. Jason's mouth went dry. The picture, it was him. Same messy brown hair, same jacket, same clueless half smile he used for student IDs. He slammed the paper shut and shoved it away like it was burning. No, this is some kind of prank, a film set, something. But deep down, a cold truth slithered into his chest. The conductor appeared again, as if summoned by Jason's fear. "You were scheduled," he said softly. Jason stood. "I'm not scheduled for anything except getting home." The conductor tilted his head. "You don't know? Humans rarely do. You were to die within the hour. A collision on Highway 46. A driver asleep at the wheel. You would not have survived." Jason's legs nearly gave out. I wasn't even planning to take the highway tonight." The conductor nodded. "Yes, that's why the line reached for you early." Jason swallowed. "So this train, what, picks up people before they die?" The conductor's smile finally reached his shadowed eyes. "Exactly." Jason stumbled backward, gripping seats for balance. "No, you can't keep me here. I'm not dead. Not yet." The conductor's voice softened. "You arrived early. It happens to a few. So let me off." The conductor turned slightly toward the window, where the void rippled like a living thing. "You may leave this train only one way. Jump into the dark." Jason stared into the moving emptiness outside. "What happens if I do?" "You may live," the conductor said. "It has happened once or twice, but the void is hungry. Most who leap never land anywhere." Jason felt a shiver crawl up his spine. "And if I stay, you will arrive at your scheduled time. When the moment comes, your body will meet its fate, and your soul will remain on board." Jason's breathing quickened. Stay and die. Jump and maybe vanish forever. Some choice. Then something even worse happened. The faceless passengers all turned their heads toward Jason in perfect unison. Slow, silent, as if listening. Jason whispered, "Oh God, are they alive?" The conductor chuckled softly. "They are. Almost. Almost." The passengers slowly raised their hands and pointed toward the window toward the void. Jason knew what they wanted. They wanted him to jump. "Why?" he whispered. "Why me?" The conductor answered calmly, "Because you still have a chance." They do not. The train's lights dimmed. The engine rumbled deeper. The void outside pulsed. Jason backed toward the door, hands shaking, heart pounding like a trapped animal. He had 1 hour left, one impossible choice: jump into darkness or ride toward his own death. So, that's where we leave him for now. Take a breath, relax your shoulders, and when you're ready, let's drift deeper into the strange, the unreal, and the bone-cold truth of the midnight line. And I'll take you deeper into the train, the void, Jason's past, and why this night was never an accident. Before we go on, have you ever felt something watching you from the dark? Even when you were alone? Jason stayed where he was for a long moment, breathing in that cold, metallic air that somehow tasted like dust and memories, trying to convince himself he wasn't losing his mind, that he wasn't standing inside a train full of faceless strangers, drifting through a darkness that didn't seem to belong to any world he knew. The hum of the engine had changed, deeper now, slower, almost like the train itself was exhaling, and each breath felt like it pulled at something inside him. He kept telling himself he wasn't going to look at the window again, but of course he did, because humans do that. We stare straight at the things we promise ourselves we won't, and the void outside had shifted. The shadows weren't floating anymore. They were gathering, pressing, almost leaning toward the glass as if curious or hungry, or both. Jason whispered, "Yeah, that's comforting. Great customer service." Trying to joke with himself, because sometimes humor is all you have when the world tilts sideways. He knew he needed information, anything to help him understand why he was here, and how to avoid whatever fate was supposedly waiting for him. So he moved, slowly, cautiously, deeper into the train car, past the still passengers, whose heads remained bowed, though he could swear he felt their attention follow him like heat from a lamp. He tried not to look at their empty eye sockets, but they were magnetic. Black holes framed by pale skin, stretched too smooth, too tight, as if their faces had been erased but their pain had stayed. He whispered, "I'm just passing through. Don't mind me." But the words fell flat, swallowed by the stale air. Toward the back of the car, he found a door with a small window, scratched so badly it looked frostbitten. Behind it, dim lights flickered, casting quick, trembling shadows that didn't match the rhythm of the train. Jason hesitated, then pushed through. The next car was colder, much colder, and filled with luggage. Old suitcases, battered trunks, torn duffel bags, some tagged with dates decades apart, others covered in dust thick enough to write in. There was something unsettling about the way they were stacked. Neat, symmetrical, too intentional, like someone had been organizing the belongings of the dead. Jason whispered, "Okay, sweet, lost and found for lost souls," and walked between the piles, brushing his fingers over one cracked leather suitcase that felt oddly warm, like someone had just touched it. When he reached the center of the car, he heard it, the faint sound of whispering, low and layered, like dozens of voices speaking at once but too quiet to understand. He froze, trying to pinpoint the source, but the whispers seemed to come from everywhere. The overhead lights, the floorboards, even the air brushing the back of his neck. One voice, deeper than the rest, murmured something that felt like it passed through him rather than reaching his ears. Something like, "Not yet," though he prayed he imagined it. Jason exhaled and kept moving, because stopping felt like surrender, and he didn't want to be one more silent passenger waiting for the end. He pushed through another door, and this time he stepped into a car that looked almost normal. Bright lights, clean floors, cushioned seats. But the moment he relaxed, he noticed the posters lining the walls. Old safety ads, missing person flyers, obituaries, all from different years, some from long before he was born, and one was new. A missing poster with his face on it, same expression as the newspaper photo, same jacket, same haircut, but the date said he vanished today, not tomorrow, not after the accident, today, as if he was already gone. Jason's chest tightened, and he backed away from the poster, whispering, No, that's not real. That can't be real." But his voice cracked, betraying him. Then the lights flickered, once, twice, and in the reflection of the window beside him, he saw movement, someone standing behind him. He spun around. No one. The car was empty. The seats were perfectly still, but in the reflection, he could swear the silhouette lingered for a heartbeat longer than it should have before vanishing. Jason whispered, "Okay, great, love that for me," and sank into a nearby seat, running his hands through his hair, trying to breathe. He needed answers. He needed logic. But logic felt like a language the train didn't speak. The conductor appeared again without warning, like he stepped out of thin air, and Jason nearly jumped out of his skin. The man tilted his head, shadowed face unreadable, and said, "You're wandering." Jason glared back, frustration boiling under his fear. "What do you want from me? A tip? Directions? A Yelp review? I didn't ask for any of this." The conductor didn't react. He simply folded his hands behind his back and said, You're trying to understand something that cannot be understood while clinging to the things you believe are real. Jason scoffed. Yeah, well, reality's kind of important to me. Reality is flexible, the conductor replied softly, almost kindly, especially at the edges. Jason leaned forward, voice cracking. Just tell me how to get off this thing. The conductor looked toward the next car, as if listening to something Jason couldn't hear, then murmured, You seek escape, but escape has a cost. Before you decide, you must understand why you were chosen. Jason blinked. You said it was an accident. Wrong time. Wrong place. Nothing is wrong, the conductor said. Everything happens according to its nature. Jason frowned. Its nature? Fate, the conductor said. Destiny. The quiet clock beneath the world that ticks whether you listen or not. Jason shook his head. No, I don't believe that. My life isn't some schedule. The conductor stepped closer, and Jason felt the temperature drop. Then let me show you what you cannot see. He lifted a gloved hand and pointed to another door, one Jason hadn't noticed before. A door marked Passenger Files in faded red paint. Jason hesitated, but curiosity tugged at him, stronger than fear. He pushed the door open and stepped into a room filled with drawers. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each labeled with a name. Some drawers were rusted shut, others hung open, revealing files worn thin from handling. And near the center, he found one with his name, Jason Carter. He touched the drawer and felt something like static jump through his fingers. The conductor appeared behind him, silent as always, and said, Open it. Jason wasn't sure if he wanted to know what was inside, but he pulled it anyway. The drawer slid open with a soft groan, revealing a thin folder. He opened it and saw pages filled with handwriting, some his, some not, dates, locations, small moments from his life that he barely remembered. And at the bottom, a page that wasn't filled yet. A blank page with only one line written at the top, time of death. Beneath it, TBD. Jason whispered, So I'm not dead yet. Not yet, the conductor replied. But you are close enough to be seen. Jason spun toward him. Seen by who? The conductor answered. The ones outside. The shadows beyond the window pulsed as if hearing their cue. Jason felt a chill crawl through him, deeper than anything before. Why me? He asked quietly. Why tonight? The conductor stared at him for a long time, and when he finally answered, the words felt heavy enough to bruise. Because you were not meant to die tonight, and something is trying to correct that. Jason's heart stopped for a beat. Something? Something old, the conductor murmured. Something that feeds on mistakes. Jason swallowed hard. And if I jump? The conductor looked toward the darkness beyond the glass. Then you choose uncertainty over inevitability. The void will try to take you, it always does. But if you fight hard enough, you may wake where you belong. Jason felt his pulse pounding in his ears. Jump and risk being lost forever. Stay and be delivered to a death that wasn't supposed to happen. And between those choices, something unseen was waiting for him to panic, waiting for him to slip, waiting to drag him into its correction. As he stood there gripping the folder with his name on it, the train lights dimmed again, and this time he heard footsteps. Soft, slow, dragging from somewhere deeper in the train. Not the conductors, not the faceless passengers, something else. And it was getting closer. Jason whispered, barely breathing, Nope, that's enough enlightenment for today, and backed away from the door, clutching the folder like it might protect him from whatever was approaching. He didn't know where to run. He didn't know who to trust. But he knew one thing with absolute clarity. If he didn't find a way off this train soon, his fate, whatever it was, would be sealed. And the shadows outside the windows, they were starting to smile. Jason's hands trembled as he stepped back into the main car, the weight of the folder pressing against his chest like it held his heartbeat in its fragile pages, and the shadows outside seemed to pulse in time with his racing pulse, stretching long and thin across the dark void beyond the windows, as though they were alive and reaching, whispering promises he didn't want to hear but couldn't ignore. And the faceless passengers, those motionless, void-eyed watchers, shifted ever so slightly in their seats, a synchronized sway almost imperceptible, yet it made his stomach knot tighter, their presence pressing on him like the cold hand of inevitability, brushing along his spine, and Jason realized the train was no longer just a vehicle, but a trap designed to unspool him slowly, to show him glimpses of what was coming before it could strike, and he moved toward the window again despite himself, hoping to find something familiar, anything to anchor him. But the blackness beyond had changed. Now faint glimmers appeared in the distance, like lights flickering on and off, small points of human scale. But as the train approached, they twisted and stretched into shapes he couldn't name, a forest of shadows with limbs too long and angles that made no sense, and a low groan filled the car, subtle at first like the settling of old metal, but it grew into a deep resonance that made his teeth chatter involuntarily, and the conductor's voice floated behind him, soft and certain. "They are closer than you think," and Jason spun around, the pale light from overhead catching the outline of the faceless passengers as they all turned slowly, deliberately, toward him, their empty sockets shining faintly with an unnatural sheen, as if aware of his terror. And he felt the air thicken, each breath tasting like iron and fear. And he knew then that the train was changing, feeding on the tension, stretching time in the way that dreams do, each second elongating until it felt like an eternity. And Jason whispered to himself, okay, just breathe. It's still real. Maybe, maybe not. And in that very moment, the first one of the shadows pressed against the glass, a long, twisting silhouette that didn't obey gravity or logic, and he jumped back with a gasp, knocking the folder to the floor. Papers fluttering, some pages landing near the faceless man who leaned forward ever so slightly, as though sniffing them. And Jason realized he was not imagining any of this. The train itself was alive in its own way, aware, and it had made him aware. And the whispers returned, layered now, many voices overlapping, a chorus murmuring fragments of his life, failures, small regrets, fleeting moments he wished he could erase. And he felt a sick realization. The train didn't just transport people, it exposed them, unraveled the threads of their existence, and judged whether they could face the void beyond or be consumed by it. And his mind raced, trying to calculate what he could do, anything, but everything was futile against the patient inevitability of the midnight line. And then he noticed movement in the distance of the car, a figure, tall and thin, emerging from the shadows between the seats. Not one of the faceless passengers, not the conductor, but something else, humanoid in shape but shifting like smoke, edges flickering in and out of reality. And Jason froze, realizing instinctively that this was what the conductor meant by something as trying to correct that. And it was aware of him, aware of his fear, and the air seemed to vibrate with a low, constant hum that resonated deep in his chest. And the faceless passengers didn't look at it, they acknowledged it, in the way one might nod to an old acquaintance. And Jason backed away slowly, trying to keep his eyes on the moving form. But it was everywhere at once, appearing in reflections, on the polished floor, and in the corner of his vision, and his heartbeat thundered in his ears as he realized the train's rhythm had changed, the hum of the engine now matching some unnatural, steady pulse that seemed to dictate time itself. And he whispered, "I don't want this. I don't want this." But the shadows outside the windows pressed harder, the void writhing like liquid darkness. And Jason knew there was no logic here, no escape through reason, only action. And the folder at his feet caught his attention, a simple, fragile connection to something he could understand. So he grabbed it, fumbling the papers into his bag, and turned toward the conductor, desperate for guidance. "What do I do? How do I get out?" And the conductor looked at him with those unreadable eyes, soft but sharp, and said, "You must go to the end. Face the doors. Make the choice that your life requires, not the one your fear demands." And Jason swallowed hard, the hum vibrating through his chest, and he realized the train stretched farther than any normal car should, endless hallways opening and closing in impossible geometry, the very air thick with anticipation. And as he walked slowly, carefully toward the back, the faceless passenger's attention remained fixed, a quiet chorus of expectation pressing down, and the whispering grew louder, voices now almost articulate, recounting memories he couldn't escape, moments that mattered and some that didn't, and each step forward felt like moving through water, the floor and walls bending, twisting, stretching the space around him. until finally he reached a door at the very end, heavy, black, unmarked, and the shadows pressed right up against the glass, limbs twisting unnaturally, faces hinting at recognition, but melting away when he blinked. And Jason knew, with a strange, sinking clarity, that what waited beyond that door was his only chance. And he exhaled, a long, shuddering breath, whispering, "Here goes nothing." Because staying had become unbearable, and the choice to step forward into the unknown, however terrifying, was suddenly the only thing that gave him any measure of control. And just as his hand touched the handle, the hum of the train reached a peak, and the whispers became a chorus of faint laughter, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. And Jason knew in that frozen instant that he was not only confronting the train, but himself. All the fear and hesitation and human mistakes he had carried, and the door before him was no longer a physical barrier, but a threshold between the life he thought he controlled and the uncertain reality the train offered. And he stepped through. Jason stepped through the heavy black door, and the world shifted in an instant, as if the train itself had peeled back the walls of reality and revealed something raw and infinite. The space beyond the door was not a car, not a room, but a vast, shadowed corridor that stretched in both directions, impossible in scale. And the air hummed with an energy that pressed against his chest, heavy and cold, like the train's own heartbeat, synchronizing with his. And the faceless passengers were gone, vanished in the blink of an eye, leaving only the echo of their presence hanging in the air, whispering faintly, almost like encouragement. And Jason realized he was utterly alone, entirely responsible for the next step, and the void outside the windows now appeared through the corridor, a swirling mass of black and faint red veins, moving as though it were a living organism, and he could feel its gaze on him, not seeing, not judging, but evaluating, testing, like a predator gauging the strength of its prey. And Jason's hands shook as he gripped the folder with his life written in fragile paper, the conductor's voice echoing softly behind him. To survive, you must choose without fear, without hesitation, and without looking back. And Jason whispered, "I don't know how to do that," because the corridor twisted and bent, doors appearing and vanishing, walls breathing like lungs, floorboards stretching, snapping slightly underfoot, and shadows seemed to peel from the corners, slithering toward him, reaching but not touching. And he realized that every instinct he had screamed to run, to scream, to collapse. Yet he took one deliberate step, and then another, focusing on the folder as a tether to something real, something human. And as he advanced, the whispering grew louder, layering into words he could almost understand, fragments of memories, warnings, fleeting moments of regret and joy, all converging into a single, suffocating wave that threatened to drown him in himself. And then he saw it, the void solidifying into a shape, not a monster, not a person, but something in between. Humanoid, tall, elongated, with limbs bending in impossible angles, eyes that flickered like dying stars, and it raised a hand slowly, almost ceremoniously, as if inviting him forward. And Jason's chest heaved, mind screaming to flee, but something in him, the desperate, stubborn spark of life, forced him to walk toward it. Each step a battle against gravity, against sanity, against the weight of inevitability. And the conductor's voice whispered again, "Face it, or it will define you." And Jason finally understood that this wasn't just the end of the line. It was a test, the ultimate confrontation with the fear he had carried all his life, the doubt, the hesitation, the quiet surrender to the notion that fate controlled everything. And as he reached the figure, the shadows around it surged forward, but they didn't strike. They circled, almost protective, almost reverent, and Jason felt a strange sense of calm wash over him, the first breath of clarity he'd had since boarding the train. And he realized that the void wasn't trying to kill him. Not exactly. It was demanding acknowledgement, that he faced the inevitability, stare into the nothingness, and choose life with eyes wide open, aware of fragility, aware of mortality, aware of himself. And he whispered, I choose to live." And for a heartbeat, the world froze, the hum of the train suspended, the whispers paused mid-word, and the void seemed to inhale, coiling tighter, then unraveling slowly, dispersing into faint, drifting shadows that melted into nothingness. And Jason felt his body drop, almost weightless, the corridor dissolving into the familiar metallic scent of the train car, lights flickering back to their steady glow, and the faceless passengers were gone, replaced by empty seats. Ordinary, solid, human, the mundane reality of a train he could understand. And the conductor was there, smiling faintly, almost kindly, his eyes glinting with a wisdom Jason could barely grasp. And he said, "Not everyone survives this passage, but those who do, remember." Jason sank into a seat, exhausted, trembling, every muscle in his body screaming, and he realized he could breathe again, fully, deeply, the folder still in his lap, blank pages except for the line of his own hand scrawled hastily, "I'm alive," and he whispered it, tasting the words, knowing that the next hour, the next day, even the next moment would be precious, fragile, because he had faced the nothing, the infinite, the inevitable, and chosen life, and yet a faint echo lingered in the air, almost playful, almost taunting, a question in the darkness. Could he truly leave the midnight line behind, or would it always exist? A shadow in the corner of his mind, waiting for the next moment of weakness, the next passenger who didn't know how to choose, and Jason, chest heaving, hair damp with sweat, glanced toward the now empty aisle, whispered softly to himself, "I guess some journeys never really end." Jason stumbled off the train at the next station, the air outside smelling like rain and asphalt, ordinary and painfully real, and for a moment he thought he was free, that the nightmare had ended. But as he stepped onto the platform, the shadows of the faceless passengers lingered at the edges of his vision, not fully there, not fully gone, like a memory trying to claw its way into the present, and he realized that surviving the midnight line didn't mean forgetting it, it meant carrying it, folding it quietly into the fabric of his life. Subtle, insidious, whispering reminders of the fragility of choice, and Jason walked slowly toward the empty streets, every sound amplified, every distant car horn and dripping gutter echoing like a heartbeat in his chest. And he tried to laugh at himself, softly, a dry, nervous chuckle, muttering, "Well, at least I didn't die. Yet." And the rain began again, gentle at first, then heavier, washing the train's metallic scent from his clothes, but not from his mind. And he passed a diner glowing with warm lights, steam curling from the coffee cups on the tables inside. And he thought about going in, about grounding himself in normality. But he hesitated, knowing that any step into routine would be a step away from the profound truth he had glimpsed, that the void, the train, the faceless passengers, and the conductor were not just nightmares. They were reminders, shadows of inevitability that existed just beneath the surface of every life. And Jason felt his chest tighten as he realized that being alive now was fragile, a gift and a burden. And he wanted to call someone, anyone, to tell them what had happened, but he feared they would never believe him, would laugh or look at him like he was insane, and maybe he was. Maybe anyone who saw the midnight line and returned was a little unhinged, and yet he could feel the pulse of it still, a quiet vibration beneath his skin, subtle but insistent. And as he walked down the deserted street toward his apartment, the neon signs flickered in a rhythm that seemed to echo the train's hum, and Jason's phone buzzed. Low battery warning. Nothing else, just a reminder of time ticking forward, of mortality moving silently, inexorably. And he thought about the choice he had made, stepping through the black door, facing the void, staring into the unknown and surviving. And he knew that the memory of fear, the taste of the shadows, the pressure of inevitability would never leave him completely, would always be there in quiet moments, in the dark before sleep, in the corners of mirrors and windows, waiting, just out of focus. A reminder that life was both precious and terrifyingly fragile. And as he climbed the stairs to his apartment, the wind rattling the old metal railing, Jason paused at his door, hand on the knob, and wondered if he was truly free, or if the midnight line had marked him in some invisible way. And when he finally stepped inside, flicked on the light and exhaled, he noticed the envelope on the table, yellowed and worn, addressed in handwriting he didn't recognize. And inside, a single note: "Some journeys never end. We will see you again soon." And Jason's stomach dropped, the familiar chill creeping along his spine, a whisper echoing in his mind. Have you ever felt something follow you, even when you thought you were alone? And he sank into his chair, heart pounding, knowing that the line between the living and the shadows was thinner than he had ever imagined, and that perhaps the midnight train was not done with him yet, waiting silently for the next wrong turn, the next forgotten step, the next soul daring to underestimate the darkness that rides just beyond the edge of our ordinary world.